Why hello everyone, this is part 2 of my series documenting if I can indeed complete my challenge of 52 PlayStation Platinum trophies in a year. So essentially, one a week. I don't want to go too much into this as this is the second part, so if you'd like to know more, a link to part 1 will be in the description. I know this can be done very easily with all the quick 20-minute platinums available, but I don't want to do that. I have played a large selection of the titles that you should play on the PlayStation, so with this I'm focusing on ones that not everyone has played or might have even heard of. The quality of these games will be very mixed. But that's all part of the fun for me with a challenge like this. I love putting something random in and seeing how it turns out. So with that said, let's pick up where I left off, this time starting with Platinum number 8 of the year. This is the game that's been putting me off getting this video together. I played it from start to finish and still don't really know how to explain what it even is. Well, number 8 was Gnaw, Play With Your Food. I guess it's pronounced Gnaw anyway, kind of like nourishment? Anyway, the best description is you load up one dish of food, play around with it, then after you've seen all that you can do with it, it usually opens up the next dish. Rinse and repeat until you've played through them all. The only time I found myself stuck not being able to move on to the next dish was when I was doing what I thought a tutorial was asking of me, to only find out I was indeed being an idiot and pressing the wrong buttons. Why did I even play this anyway? Well, I was just sat there going through the PS Plus library one evening, and it just jumped out to me as something I'd never heard of. I went in blind, hoping it would be an easy completion, and I was half right, as it's very skill dependent, and you need some experience with a certain genre. Luckily, it's a genre I've played a good number of games in. It turns out this game is actually a hidden rhythm game, but you wouldn't know this if you didn't have the rhythm prompts turned on. All these do is add a small dot in the top corner of the game to show if you hit a note in time with the music, so they're easily missed. This doesn't give you the timing though, it's done blind. The game contains combos you need to pull off to different time signatures to activate. I'm good at rhythm games, but actually counting timing in music, I suck at that. I had to sit there tapping my knee to keep any semblance of rhythm, but when you have the hang of it, you can pull them off pretty much every time. These rhythm-based combos are the only thing that may actually give people some trouble getting the platinum, as sadly, a large chunk of the trophies are tied to them. Everything else is literally just playing with the food, like making it larger or smaller, smashing some plates, and just generally causing chaos. There is one very grindy trophy though, where some random jellyfish pops up from time to time, and he steals your food. The trophy is to feed all types of food to this jellyfish. Luckily there's a workaround to this though. If you start the game again, and when you hit the jellyfish tutorial, you can keep feeding him and restarting the level. This takes a lot of time, but it's much easier, as this allows you to keep giving him the same food over and over, instead of working out a list of the 150-ish foods available in the game and hoping that he takes a new one every time. Do I recommend this game to anyone? No. Have I sold this to you? Probably not. Have I made it clear what this game's even about? Of course I fucking haven't. It felt like some kind of fever dream and you'd only understand it if you've actually played it. It took me roughly 5 hours to hit the platinum trophy, but if I wasn't used to rhythm games, this would have been a much longer time, and maybe even a tough one for me to finish. Go into this completion at your own risk, and I will make this point again. This game is just weird. There's a bit of a theme to this video, as the second game I finished was actually a rhythm game, and I knew it going in. This is also one I knew I'd be able to get done, as I've done it before on the PS Vita. Persona 5 Dancing in Starlight is a spin-off to the ever so popular Persona series. There's one of these for each Persona 3, 4 and 5 actually. Of course this one features the characters and music from Persona 5. It's kind of in the title, innit? I do feel bad as I have to say I've never actually finished a playthrough of one of the mainline entries in the series, but I do enjoy the music and the overall art style. The game plays out with a ring around the outer screen, with D-pad icons on the left and face button icons on the right. When the notes hit the button icons, press the corresponding button. It's that simple. When you have to pull off the scratches which come at you as a full line, just move one of the sticks. It also has the usual held notes that are also common in this style of game too. What's great about these games is they're incredibly accessible to newcomers of the genre, as you can modify the difficulty, note speed, and the need to use scratches, etc. And they're even awarded for playing around with these options. The platinum for the game basically boils down to playing all the songs, aiming for decent rankings, beating a song with a full combo, and working on some story content. That's right, this is part rhythm game, part visual novel. If you've played the Persona fighting games, it's similar to that, with a story running alongside the gameplay. To be honest, the first time I beat this, it was all in Japanese, so I was looking forward to being able to understand the story this time, but sadly I didn't find it engaging enough to actually pay any attention to it. I found it this way though with all the Persona dancing games I've played, but the music and gameplay is what brings me back to it every time. After a certain amount of story, which you unlock by beating a number of challenges, you'll be invited into people's bedrooms, where you have a first-person 3D environment to explore and find collectible cards. All of these need to be found for the platinum, and it's one per visit. Finishing all these steps will just about wrap up the game. It's not difficult, and I think it took me around 10 hours to beat, but I wasn't going into this one fresh, so I had a bit of an advantage. I would recommend these games to anyone who likes rhythm games, but for once I'd give this a digital recommendation, as the collection comes with a copy of Persona 4 Dancing All Night, which is no longer available with a physical, as it was a download code and they've all expired. This is an expensive set on the store though, at around £80, but it goes on sale all the time. I just bought it myself for £13. Maybe so I could get hold of another game, for down the line in a certain challenge. Game number 10, again, is a rhythm game. Yeah, complete surprise, I know. Don't worry, this is the last one for the video. Kingdom Hearts Melody of Memory is a retelling of the series so far, but set to the backdrop of a rhythm game. Strange concept, but this is ultimately a pretty strange franchise anyway, with its crossover of Final Fantasy and Disney. The game plays along a traditional rhythm game lane format, and you need to press the buttons as the enemies hit your characters running along this path. This does take some getting used to though, as the characters run about and change position going forwards and backwards, so the game gives you more of an indication of when to press the button by having a prompt shrink around the icon. What this means is, if you want to get good, you're going to have to listen to the music and watch the indicators rather than the position of the characters. I found this jarring at first, as I'm more used to the position of the timing window not changing location, but it's pretty easy to get used to. My major gripe with the game is that for a rhythm game, the music isn't all that inspiring. Most of the music is just background music from the games, which to be honest, isn't what I'm looking for in this style of game. I prefer more fast-paced technical songs from either the rock or metal genre, or some kind of crazy electronic madness. The standouts are where it actually uses more traditional songs for this type of game, but these are few and far between, and my guess is these were the ones created for intros and the credits to the main games. I haven't played much Kingdom Hearts, so I'm not sure about that. It just seems that way. The gameplay does get mixed up by having these flying stages, which isn't fighting enemies, but is more of a traditional note formula, and the notes get turned on their side while fighting bosses. But at the end of the day, they all play the same, only with the alternative gameplay styles adding in directional presses instead of the hold to fly bits from the main game. At the end of the day, it's not a very deep game, just press the buttons in time with the music. But this doesn't mean getting the platinum is an easy feat. The game features 150 songs, which the game wants you to play through on every difficulty. So that's playing a total of 450 songs just there. It also wants you to complete 50 of them on each difficulty without making a mistake, which on the Proud difficulty can be a bit of a challenge. This can be made a little easier as the game features modifiers, such as being able to play in one button mode, which lets you hit all the notes by just pressing one button. Playing on this mode does count as different songs when you're going for the 100%, but it does not go towards any of the trophies for beating songs on certain difficulties or the amount of enemies killed. It's a shock they work towards the 100% notes hit, to be honest. Other than these 100% song trophies, the rest of the game isn't too hard. It's just a major grind. You earn XP after each song, which is used to level up your party members, of which you have to get the classic team up to max level. I'm not sure what this actually does other than unlock items. It might give you more health, but this was never really an issue for me. Items you find come in the form of materials, which need to be combined to unlock new songs, so a lot of the time you'll find yourself just grinding for materials. One of the items you unlock lets Mickey Mouse join your party, and you have to play alongside him for over an hour, so this takes a decent number of items, as he only stays for one song at a time. The biggest grind though is defeating 100,000 enemies, which if you've been playing for a while on one button mode, to knock out some of those hard difficulty 100%, the enemies killed here don't count, so it's back to the normal mode to mop these up. Even after getting all this grinding out of the way, there is one more major hurdle the game throws at you, which I've read has stopped quite a few people getting the platinum. The game contains a versus mode and you have to hit the highest level. Luckily this can be done against computer opponents, but when you get in towards the end they will be playing on hard and hitting almost everything perfectly. This also has to be played with the standard gameplay, so there's no one button mode here. I consider myself pretty good at rhythm games, and beating the last couple of opponents did test me a little. Overall I would say this is good for a few playthroughs, but going for the platinum could be torture. Only go for this one if you really like the genre, or are just a massive Kingdom Hearts fan and can't get enough of the music. According to True Trophies, the game took me 58 hours and 29 minutes to beat. I enjoyed the majority of it, but the grindy nature didn't need to be there. After such a long experience with Kingdom Hearts, I wanted to jump into something which I was hoping would be a rather quick time. So I had a look through my shelves and thought, you know what, it's shovelware time again. So I slapped My Life Pet Vet into the system, and soon wished I hadn't. This is one of those strange, super cheap simulator games, with you taking up the mantle of a small town vet this time. The game features a bit of an open world map, which doesn't really serve much of a purpose other than going from your house to the practice, which to be honest doesn't even need to be done more than once. When you're at the practice you can just stand at the table and work through all the randomly generated pets that appear. The only time you'll ever need to leave this room is when an animal is staying for aftercare, and they'll just be outside the back of the practice. This only needs to be done for 25 animals though, then you can ignore them if you wish, but you will earn more money if you tend to them. Treating every animal is the same. Spin the camera around it, follow the on-screen prompts which are the same for every procedure, and get paid for the treatment. So what does this game expect you to do for the Platinum Trophy? Well, not a lot. It soon becomes a major grind though. You have to treat 100 animals, which I had done super swift as I didn't leave the table side. But this doesn't mean you're done. You have to unlock everything such as practice upgrades, home upgrades, and a ton of cosmetic items. Good thing this is easy to do. Keep treating animals, and buying new bits every once in a while. All can be done from the pause menu, standing next to the table. The game does ask you to treat every disease though at least once. This can be a pain and the last thing I needed to do, as these appear random, and you will be at the will of the RNG gods. So how long this takes is up to how nicely the game wants to treat you. After this, you're only tasked with one more objective. Get all the collectibles. These come in the form of rubbish that can be cleared up, and some statues to be found. The rubbish isn't too hard to find. Just travel all the roads and paths of the open world, and you'll find them in no time. The statues, on the other hand, can be a complete pain to locate. They're pretty small and they can be off the beaten path, such as in people's back gardens or next to bodies of water which you're sure you shouldn't be able to reach. I did find some guides to try and help with this when I was looking for the last one, but they weren't super helpful, and I just had to tackle this with a methodical approach in the end. I did this game in one sitting and it took me about 8 or 9 hours. I wouldn't suggest anyone to play this unless you want a platinum with a very low completion number. According to True Trophies, I was the 19th person to finish it on their site, and no one has since. I make no secret to the fact that I really like the Power Wash Simulator game, and have actually beaten it multiple times with all achievements and trophies on Xbox, Steam and PlayStation systems. Because of this, if people see a game in the same vein, they will often message me about it, or at least they tag me in the comments of a trailer or something. This is what happened with Space Cleanup Cosmic Robot Disinfector. Gordon over at GIB84 Gaming was doing one of his usual digs into the Nintendo eShop bargains and let me know about this weird spaceship cleaning game. So naturally, I jumped on to see if there was a PlayStation version and if it had a platinum trophy. Since we're talking about it now, of course it hit this criteria. This is another game I sat and did in one sitting, only taking about 3 hours to finish, but it feels much longer, as every part of the game is exactly the same. You use a jet of water to wash off alien blood, and use this anti-gravity gun to pick up body parts and weapons and put them in a bin. Rinse and repeat for about 20 levels. I say levels, but the game is broken up into sectors, so completing one area just opens a door and you get to go into the next set of rooms. This means you can walk back through all the areas if you miss anything, making this a very easy completion. There are collectibles, but you'll find these easily, as you'll already be looking at every inch of the sections as you're trying to clean them. From time to time it will ask you to complete challenges. These will only be pick up all the parts of a human or all the parts of an alien. Just complete these as they come up. You can also force the game to do certain ones simply by placing an alien or a human bit in the bin first when you have no active mission. You need to do a certain number of humans and alien missions, so keep doing these until the trophies pop. So yeah, that's it for a platinum. Find the collectibles, dispose of certain body parts, and finish the sections. If you don't mind some repetition, it's not a long and hard one to finish, but it's not for everyone. Being a budget first-person game, it also gave me a bit of motion sickness. Not sure why this happens with these budget games, but it must have something to do with the less than optimal frame rates. Other than that, the only other criticism is only being able to pick up one body part at a time. This slows down progress, but if you could do even 3 at a time, I guess the game would only be an hour long, and maybe not worth the £10 or so it costs on the PlayStation Store. Last year I beat Polygon Treehouse's Mythwrecked, which I really enjoyed, so I wanted to try out the game they released before, this being Roki, a point-and-click adventure inspired by Scandinavian folklore. The story follows the tale of a young girl out on a mission to rescue her brother from a monster called Roki, who wrecked their home and made off with him. I don't want to go into the story in any detail, as I really enjoyed seeing where it was going to go, and with a point-and-click, the story is always a pretty big focus, but I will say I think it's worth your time for a playthrough. Going for the platinum might not be for everyone though, as if you want to do it in one sitting, you're going to have to spoil a few bits for yourself to make sure you don't miss out on the large number of missable trophies. Where the game has no chapter select and 3 main sections, you won't be able to return to areas without starting over again. Later in the game there's also trophies for exhausting dialogue between 2 characters, but there's no real indicator that you've done all of these, and if it doesn't pop before the end, you'll have to restart the chapter again from the pause menu, otherwise it's starting from the beginning all over. That's if you can. I swear I remember seeing the option, but don't take my word for it. Other missable trophies are for completing what seems like little side quests that don't really affect the story. The game also allows you to inspect every item in your inventory, so I would suggest doing this every time you get a new item, as you have to inspect 50 items for a trophy. Technically you could miss this, but the game gives you a lot of items, so as long as you're aware of it, you won't have any issues, and this will be done quite quickly. Also, make sure you use all of the warp gates you unlock, but these help you get around, so hopefully you won't miss this one. Sorry I'm giving a bit less detail on this one, but that's because if you like the genre, I would highly suggest giving it a go. This is when I started before Christmas last year, and decided to finish it for this challenge. Going back I was a little lost as the map can be a bit confusing at times, but when I started again for this run, I had no issues relearning the areas for a second time. This is one that doesn't give me any playtime data on the trophy tracking site I use, but I think it took me around 10 hours for 1 and a bit playthroughs, but your mileage will vary, as it's very puzzle heavy, and some people will struggle more than others. Here we are, back to another game which even after achieving the platinum, I still don't really understand it. Toho Kabuto 5 Burst Battle? It might be 5, it might just be V, I don't know. It's from a genre I've never really understood, the bullet hell fighter genre. The only other game I've ever played like this was Wartech Senko no Ronde on the Xbox 360, which I spent hundreds of hours getting the 1000G on, and at the end was still just mashing buttons. This is basically a one-on-one fighter, where you play as characters from the Toho series, I believe. Each battle takes place on a square platform floating in some void, which may or may not contain the odd cube to hide behind. From here, if you're at range from your opponent, you will fire projectiles, and if you're up close, you will melee. You have a stamina bar which will deplete if you run, which you will need to keep an eye on, as you will have to run to dodge the barrage of bullets all the time. For a game like this, it doesn't seem to give you any tutorials on how to play in the options. I don't know if it did when you first booted the game up, as I started this back in 2020. I finished a character's playthrough and then swore I'd never put it back in the console. But here we are. I went back in and still regret it. The game doesn't ask much from you for the platinum, and the guides online only give it a 4 out of 10 for difficulty. So I thought, why not? Let's knock it off the backlog. So what do you have to do for this 4 out of 10 difficulty? You have to beat the story mode with each character, which are 2-round matches up against 6 opponents, usually ending with fighting some large head that spouts glitchy noises, which only has 1 round. Yeah, this game's fucking weird. Story mode is the easiest, as if you're defeated, you can just try again until it's over. After story mode, the game wants you to beat the arcade mode and beat a score in the challenge mode with each character. I would suggest doing the arcade mode, then the challenge mode for one character before moving on to the next, as it will be fresh in your mind how to cheese your way through the rounds with each character. Arcade mode, you have to beat 7 enemies in a row without dying. Each round you get a little bit of your health back, but not a full bar. This is the toughest mode in my opinion, as so many times you will get to the 6th enemy, then they will throw someone at you who will hit you with a one-hit kill. Challenge mode, you have to beat a score of 100,000 points. This again is a set of 1-round fights, and I believe you are scored on how much health you have left, and maybe the moves used. I say maybe, as a lot of the time I found I could get this score within 4 fights, but some characters took up to 13 in a row. I think this was due to spamming moves that were only chipping away at the health, where others did major damage. Once you've beat all 3 of these modes with all characters, you will have the platinum. I would say avoid this one like the plague though. I don't really get angry at games much, but this one had me ready to break a controller. Everything was just so inconsistent in difficulty. When I finally beat a mode, it felt like the game let me win rather than I was getting better at it. The only advice I can give is to test all moves with the characters until you find something you can land a lot of the time which deals major damage, and just repeat. You have extra moves you can do by holding L1 or when running with R1. These are usually more powerful moves, but you need to keep an eye on the weapon's power down on the bottom right corner at all times so you can charge up the shots. I did read there is a block button online, but no buttons seem to block anything. This game is a steaming pile of shite. I only bought it as I was hoping it was going to be a shmup, and I went in blind. Oh, it's also one of the ugliest games on the PS4 for sure. I had the platinum on this one in just under 13 hours, but it felt more like 33. Fort Solis is a game I played through last year in my 52 game challenge, but I played it with a girlfriend over on her profile, and we didn't achieve the platinum. But I knew going into it, it was one I would love to play again, and knew the platinum was relatively easy. It's a narrative horror exploration walking simulator kind of game, sort of in the vein of the Dark Pictures anthology games, but with way less choices and outcomes, less quick time events too. The game takes place on Mars, where you go to investigate a distress call from the aptly named mining station Fort Solis, as when you get there, the place seems deserted. From here on out you have to explore the station, finding clues in the form of audio and video logs to piece together what's happened there. But it's not long before you realise something has gone very wrong, and you might not be alone. Obtaining the platinum is actually really easy, with a guide. It asks you to find all of the game's collectibles, do a few small extra actions, and then see an alternative ending. I would say go into this one blind though, as a playthrough is only 3 hours long, so a second run isn't that much of an inconvenience. But if this isn't your thing, only a handful of the collectibles are missable, so look up which ones they are and enjoy your time. For anything else, you can load up just before the end of the game and explore a large amount of the station for mop-up. Even the alternative ending can be achieved by loading up the final checkpoint. Again, this is one I don't want to spoil the story for, but I do recommend this one if you want something slightly spooky with an overall pretty chill side, as you're never really in any danger. I have heard people complain about the ending and the price for a game of this length, but I believe a game shouldn't be judged on its length. Plus, these days I prefer a shorter experience. The final game to talk about today, bringing us up to date on the challenge with platinum number 16, is The Plucky Squire on PS5. I played this through PlayStation Plus, as the game looked great, but the physical was still over £50 everywhere when I was looking for it, and I'm happy I went this route. I will still grab a physical for collecting purposes if I ever find one cheap, but I had some issues with the game which soured my experience. The game is a 2D and 3D adventure game. It takes place in the pages of a storybook, which allows the game to have some rather fun little gimmicks. You play as Jot, the plucky squire, who is joined by a small group of friends who need to overthrow the evil Humgrump. The game starts out with a top-down perspective, the same as something like The Legend of Zelda, but as the pages of the book turn, it changes it up with things like side-scrolling sections, and even throwbacks to video games of old, such as a Punch-Out-inspired fight against a honey badger. Soon your characters realise they're in a book, and to progress through the world and solve puzzles, they will need to jump out of the book into the 3D world to collect items and manipulate the book itself. These 3D sections are like levels in themselves, which are spawned in on the desk behind the book. These also contain the odd 2D section where you jump into paper or notes on walls, a bit like the 2D sections in Mario Odyssey. If you're not completing a 3D level, you'll still be jumping out of the book to turn back pages and revisit areas or to slide items about by tilting the pages. This is a great idea, but after a while, it can feel like it's used a bit too much. I also found that the game seemed to take control away from you every couple of minutes, either this to be for dialogue or to give hints about upcoming puzzles. I feel it would have been a bit more fun if the game let you have more free reign to explore its quirky elements and to figure them out more for yourself, but these constant stops, although annoying, aren't bad for a single playthrough, and if you're using a guide for collectibles, it won't bother you at all. My problem is I went in blind on this one, and then had to go back through the chapter select to mop up missing items. This is where my issues came in. I found a few areas, especially the final area of the game, where I could just soft lock myself, and since I was in chapter select, I couldn't just quit and reload where I was. I would have to restart the entire chapter again. This is where the constant stopping got on my tits, and making collectibles is a bit of a nightmare if you have to stop and restart anything. This could easily be sorted out with a patch that lets you skip the story aspects and the dialogue. If you want to go for this one, I hate to say it, but use a guide for the collectibles, as even with the chapter select it can be a painful time. I will have to say that I do think people should play this one though, as it's trying something different, and the humour is pretty good. It reminded me of a mix between Puppeteer, 2D Zelda, Scribblenauts and Mario Odyssey, which isn't a bad mix. I just wish it didn't feel so linear. After all that, what do you need to do to snag the Platinum Trophy? Not too much is the answer. Beat the game, find all the collectibles, rearrange some of the book's text in strange ways, and beat some retro-inspired minigames. I will say there is a trophy in Chapter 4 for grabbing a fish first try. Make sure, unlike me, you do this in your first playthrough, as if you miss you can just quit to the menu, then try again. If you do this through Chapter Select, you will have to play a good 10 or so minutes into the level before you can have another go, and this can take multiple attempts. It's an easy platinum if you go into this game with a plan, but you will soon find aspects frustrating if you went in blind like me. Not hard, just frustrating. Well, there it is. At the time of writing, it's still February, and we're 16 platinums deep. I do plan on playing some longer games, but I want to make sure I leave myself enough time to be playing those titles. But then again, I plan on playing stuff, and then something shiny will distract me. I have no idea what's coming up next, but that's what's fun with a challenge like this. If you didn't see part 1, it'll be linked in the description, and I will add subsequent parts there too, and in a playlist as and when I get them done. I'm always surprised if people make it this far into my videos. But if you did, feel free to like, comment, subscribe. Let me know in the comments if you finished any of these. And if you did you have a similar experience? Anyway, buggering off now. Have fun.